Joining me today on our panel of politicians, the Labor MP Kelvin Thomson, hello to you, and the National Senator John Williams, hello to you as well. We have just received some briefings of what went on in these separate party room meetings this morning. Julia Gillard apparently said to you that she thinks Tony Abbott has made a few errors, saying that he would immediately repeal the carbon tax. Does she feel like, do you think, from what you heard today, that this argument, the debate, has really turned around on the offers of compensation, which is still very vague at this stage?
I think it is significant, Ashley, that we're having a discussion now about assistance, and the fact that Ross Garnaut talked about tax cuts and the like has got people thinking about the package of measures rather than the idea of it's a tax. And you'll remember that John Howard was able to introduce the GST, saying it's not a new tax, it's a new tax system. And I think that people will start to think about those things and focus on those things as we get more detail. When you run a scare campaign, it's based on fear of the unknown, and the more detail it comes forward, I think the harder it will be to get a scare campaign happening.
Well, Julia Gillard apparently said that that was a mistake because it didn't leave Tony Abbott anywhere to go, and he said straight off the bat, we're going to repeal the carbon tax and also repeal any compensation that goes along with it.
Well, that's certainly our policy, Ashley, because this tax, and we don't, Kelvin is correct when he says we don't have much detail. We don't have much detail. How much will a tax be? Will it be on fuel? Will it cover the cost of transport? What else? So we don't know the detail, but now we're seeing Ross Garnaut saying 50% of the tax collected will go to households and 50% elsewhere. We've had Ministers Combay and Simon Crean saying 100% will go to the households. So some households obviously saying, well, when this tax comes in, we're going to be better off. So let's see what the detail is, but it's still a tax, it's still a cost, and of course our biggest fear is simply it'll shift a lot of industries overseas and will make no effect whatsoever to the whole environmental conditions of the atmosphere.
Apparently another thing Julia Gillard said today was that she thinks that Tony Abbott is making a conscious effort to get climate change deniers support. We've seen Mr Abbott flip-flopping on this. And one day he'll say he does believe climate change is real, the next day he'll say, oh, well, the science isn't too settled. Is that a deliberate strategy?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a deliberate strategy, but we've all got our opinions, and we in the National Party have said from day one when we fought off the emissions trading scheme with the help of people like Tony Abbott, that no matter what we do in Australia, because of the small reductions from the around 550 million tonnes a year, it might go down 50 million tonnes, that is not going to change anything in the globe while the big emitters do nothing. And we've put that message out saying the risk is the cost of doing business here may transfer a lot of our industries overseas and we lose the jobs and then forced to import those products back.
So if it's not going to do anything, what's the point of having your alternative direct action plan if you don't believe this is a problem that needs to be tackled?
The alternative plan, which I've played a big part in actually as far as soil sequestration, is a vital issue because if you look at the island of Australia, the whole nation, probably 60% of our country is in the hands of farmers and graziers. It is very hard for them to be green when so many are so far in the red. So it's a policy about protecting the soil. If this is all proved to be wrong in the future, at least we've invested in our soil for future generations to grow our food. It's actually a health issue. Healthy soil means healthy food, means healthy people. And that's why we're driving this issue. Hedge our bets, so don't just tax everyone and compensate people as well, and the money goes nowhere, but actually look after our environment for future generations. That's why we've been driving this very issue in the National Party.
Kelvin, what do you make of that argument? Because it is one that we've heard over and over again from Tony Abbott, and it's been working for him up until this point.
Two observations. I think that Tony Abbott and the opposition have a problem with knee-jerk opposition. They've said that they are going to oppose our proposal, whatever it is, and it's true that there's not a lot of detail yet, but the idea that no matter how good it turns out to be, how good the assistance package is for people, they're simply going to oppose it, suggests to me that they're engaging in knee-jerk opposition, and I don't think that'll serve them well or the country well in future. In relation to the international question, John, it seems to me that if Australia is going to say, well, we're not going to do something until everybody else does something, then that is a recipe for inaction and failure, and it's really irresponsible. Every country in the world needs to pull its weight in relation to this issue, but it's like an ordinary household. If you say, I'm not going to clean up my room until everybody else cleans up their room, pretty soon you get left with a house which is in a state of disrepair and presently uninhabitable. I think everyone has to pull their weight.
Do you you think, though, that it was a mistake not to release the details of the compensation package at the beginning? Because you've had weeks now of this very vague debate, and it's allowed Tony Abbott to really get ahead on his messages.
Ashley, the truth is, if we had emerged with a full-blown package with all the detail determined, the first thing we would have experienced are cries from the opposition, cries from business, cries from households, cries from environment groups saying, why weren't we consulted? We've had no say in this. We need to have a conversation. We're having a conversation with business. We're talking with environment groups. We're talking with representatives of households and so on. You need to have discussion on a thing like this, which is a work in progress. You cannot expect to just unveil the whole thing in one fell swoop.
As you just comment on Kelvin there about leading the world in this very issue, if Kelvin had been a pig farm like I was, and we led the world on free trade and saw what we did to the pig industry, perhaps you might have a different attitude, because we as small operators led the world in many issues of free trade to the demise of many of our industries. I don't want to see that happen as far as CO2 emissions go.
Well, climate change is a global problem. You're right to say that Australia on its own cannot solve this problem, but equally, unless there is collective international effort, we will not solve this problem. And if Australia takes the irresponsible course of action, says it's someone else's problem to fix, and other countries around the world take a similar course of action, then we will all go to hell in a handbasket.
Just back to this poll, though, why do you think there was that big change today, Senator? Do you think that it is because Labor's now starting to get ahead on this issue because of the compensation, and that doesn't bode well for the coalition if that is the case?
Well, my personal opinion is yes. I think the generous compensation that's been put out there by the government may entice some people to say, well, this is going to be good. That's just it's a vague thing in itself. Perhaps, in my personal opinion, is the last poll showing the primary vote of the Labor Party down to 30. It may have been a bit extreme. This one may be the other way. I sort of feel it's probably halfway in the middle, but the point is this: when you're in opposition, it's a hard boat to row, and we've found it out, and we've got to keep doing our job and show to the Australian people we are an alternative government.
So you don't agree with Tony Abbott that it was because Julia Gillard was overseas with Barack Obama, she saw Prince William? He apparently in this party room meeting this morning also says he expects a big bounce after the royal wedding because Julia Gillard will be there.
That could well be the case, because Julia Gillard has been out in the public arena, her passionate speech to Congress in America. Those things all weigh in favour. People form an opinion, and as time goes on, people form opinions on other issues, and you may see those polls go down as well. So the big thing is, when it comes to the next election, we've got to have the facts out there to show to the people that this is what we can do for the future of our nation compared to what the Labor Party has done and will do.
Some analysts are also saying today they think that Julia Gillard's decision to last week try and distance herself from the Greens might have played into this too.
It's difficult to know exactly what factors contribute to public opinion, and I'm wary of over-analysing polls. I accept what John says. It's possible that the poll that showed us back at 30% a couple of weeks ago was understating our position. The poll today might be overstating our position. It's difficult to know. But I do think that Julia Gillard has performed well in the course of the last couple of weeks, and when Tony Abbott says that she did well from her visit to America, I think there's some truth in that. I think that she did do well over there. There was a poll taken sort of straight after that which didn't reflect it, but sometimes over the years I've noticed that events that are good or bad for you take a poll or two to wash through the system. There's a bit of a delayed reaction, so that may be playing a role.
And there are going to be a lot more polls to come before we get to the next election, and we'll look forward to analysing each one that comes out.
And every politician looks at them despite what they say, I can assure you.
This line about not paying any attention is absolutely rubbish. Let's move on to another issue. Immigration. Last night we saw another boatload of asylum seekers were brought to the mainland to be processed, but they're going to be processed as offshore arrivals. Kelvin, how is that working? The opposition is saying you're being forced into this position because your asylum seeker policy is failing and border protection is out of control.
The government's taken a decision that it's not appropriate to process the latest group of arrivals on Christmas Island, and that's taken with regard to the circumstances presently existing on Christmas Island, so that seems to me to be a prudent thing to do. They are being processed as offshore arrivals in accordance with the government's policy of considering applications for refugee status on their merits.
We heard just a short time ago that apparently there are still some asylum seekers missing on Christmas Island. Yesterday we were told that the ones who had managed to escape did come back and they were all there. Apparently that's not so. So does that really show us an example of how Labor isn't in control of this situation, that we have some people roaming the island?
Well, the Australian Federal Police is involved on Christmas Island making sure that the situation is under control, and if people are engaging in criminal acts and the like, they're being investigated by the Australian Federal Police. You can have the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions lay charges in relation to that, and it's also the case that if you are an applicant for permanent residence, you have to pass a character test, and some of the behaviour and conduct which has gone on in Christmas Island in recent times suggests to me that there are people there who would not pass the character test.
John, it's not like the government isn't doing anything about this. They're opening new immigration centres on the mainland. They're still working towards this East Timor regional solution. Next week we'll see the Bali process happen, the meeting there focusing on what sort of regional solution there can be.
Actually, go back to the root of the problem. Why are we facing this huge industry of people in Indonesia shipping people to Australia, asylum seekers? That's where the real problem started, and we know why it started: government changing the regulations and lowering the bar. This is way past a joke now. We've got people coming to Christmas Island, originally set up to house 1,200 people, about 2,700 there now, burning the place, throwing stones at police, rioting, creating chaos. This would really annoy the Australian taxpayer, who is seeing now hundreds of millions of dollars into the billions, the cost of asylum seekers, money that could be here used in our aged care facilities and various other programs in Australia that are in desperate need, and now the whole thing is out of control. East Timor, well, 8 months has gone, Ashley. Are we going to see anything? Nauru is there ready to go. Why doesn't the government just swallow their arrogant pill and go to Nauru? It's established, it was built under the Howard era. Why don't they use that? And now the thing is basically out of control. Huge cost, and the industry is showing no signs of stopping, and there is a real problem. This is going to go on and on unless the government actually does act, and act soon.
We haven't seen much support in terms of our regional neighbours for this East Timor immigration centre to be set up. Do you think that might change next week at the Bali process? Are you expecting some breakthrough on that?
Well, I'm not in a position to comment on what might happen there, but you're right, there is a conference going on there at which this precise issue will be discussed. The government's made it clear that it wants to see a regional processing facility established. I think that's a good policy. I do think we have to have a regional solution to what is a regional problem, so I am hopeful that there will be progress made during these discussions, and we will be able to move to a regional processing facility. It's not the case that this problem is unique to Australia. Right around the world there are asylum seeker problems, and they are driven by factors and circumstances in particular countries which cause people to take to the boats and to leave, and they try to get to Europe, and they try to get to various places around the world. We're now experiencing fewer arrivals from Sri Lanka. Presumably John would say this is not as a result of good Labor government policy. This is as a result of an improvement in the circumstances in Sri Lanka, which means that fewer people take to the boat. So it's an international problem, but I believe that a regional solution is appropriate for it.
But if there's no big development next week, is this an idea that Labor should give up on?
I think we are entitled to work on this approach with other countries in the region to seek a regional processing facility, and we can make a decision at an appropriate time about whether that continues to be the best way to go, but I certainly think it is an option which is worthy of pursuit. Do
you expect we'll see some developments, John?
Well, who knows, Ashley, but all the government's got to do is learn from the past. When John Howard and his government had this problem in July, August 2001, 1,000 people a month, it was a serious problem. They had the problem, they found a solution. The government's only got to learn from the past. Temporary protection visas, Nauru relocation, and that solved the problem then. Why don't you do it now? And this whole ranting and raving about East Timor that's gone on for 8 months, Ashley, from Prime Minister Gillard, still getting nowhere. Well, the solution is there, but I don't know what is about so many that arrogance prevents them from using their common sense.
Okay, both of you stay with us, and you stay with us as well. Coming up after the break, we're going to look at some startling developments in Queensland politics in the last few hours. Stay with us.